The 2019 Game Developers Conference will feature an exhibition called Alt.Ctrl.GDC that uses alternative control schemes and interactions. Gamasutra will be talking to the developers of each of the games that have been selected for the showcase. EXTRAREALITY CODEBREAKER gives players what appears to be an OTV, tasking them with interacting with 16 puzzles on different channels. Finding the answer to those puzzles is just the beginning, as players must then look at the information they have found and work it out in the real world. Gamasutra spoke with Pol Vilaseca, developer of EXTRAREALITY CODEBREAKER, to learn about the difficulties faced in designing puzzles around a single input. We also talked about the developers' interest in engaging the player outside of the game world, bringing play beyond the screen, by drawing the input interact into reality. My name is Pol Vilaseca, and this was a solo project. I did all of the programming, hardware engineering, puzzle design, art, and woodworking. EXTRAREALITY CODEBREAKER is a puzzle game involving finding hidden codes in strange, interactive television channels. There are two dials on the box. The top dial selects the puzzle, while the bottom dial is what you use to solve it. Each puzzle leads to a 5 or 6-letter English word, which is your hidden code for that puzzle. I have been reading a lot about sculptors recently, and I was struck by an essay by Judd called Specific Objects. In it, one of the points he argues is that we have done utter disservice by placing it behind a frame, separating it from the viewer. His solution to this was to create objects of solid materials that were placed in a room, in a way that forced the viewer to engage with the object. I liked the idea of performing a lift like that to get a player to engage with an input interaction. But instead of moving the game scene out from behind the screen into the real world, like via I thought that I would try lifting the whole input interaction, and have the player mimic the interaction outside of the game. I wanted to design a game that explored how an input device can be used to control something. In order to do that, I needed a puzzle architecture that was flexible enough to accommodate a large number of different mechanics, using English words as the answers, along with finding figure and breaking codes, seemed to be the solution to those issues. The game is designed to explore dial interactions. As a result, the dial needs to be used in as many different ways as possible. In general, I started with the possible way for a dial to control something, and built the puzzle around it. The tricky part there is that you need a way to extend the interaction in order to design the second step of each puzzle, which was not always possible. I really enjoy the design of old television sets, especially the wooden ones. This game does not need very many inputs, so it made sense to make the design simple and minimalist. I wanted to make the first step of the puzzle straightforward so players would have something to latch onto when they started in the puzzle. The second step is harder, but in order to make the game more approachable, I created 16 sets of laminated objects that act as solving aids. They can be written on with a dry erase marker, and they serve as a guide to the second step. In addition, no puzzle requires sound or color to solve. I wanted to make the game as accessible as possible. I made a game called Rip, which was a logic puzzle game that tried to let solvers down an interesting solve path by carefully mapping out information at every step of the puzzle. It was showcased at PAX East a few years ago, with the indie Megabooth. EXTRAREALITY CODEBREAKER is run on a Raspberry Pi, is coded in C, and uses the experimental OpenGL drivers on the board. I coded it on my Mac in Judd. Using OpenGL 3 on GLSL 335 shaders, the Raspberry Pi only runs OpenGL 2.1 and GLSL 1.0. However, so every time I have coded a new feature or written a new shader, I have had to port the code from the newer version to the older one. This is definitely not the best way to do this. The case is made from African padauk wood, which gives it a nice orange color. The front panel is laser engraved maple. I am also building 2 other boxes out of Purple Heart and Winch. Unique controllers enable unique interactions. Without a standalone box with a dial, there would be no way to perform the lift mentioned above, which is what the whole game is designed around. The puzzle mechanics and game would not make sense with a different type of controller. Pol Vilaseca, senior economy designer at King, and Pietro Guardascione, senior director of envelope design at King. Hero was an action RPG that was developed by King and soft-launched during 2016 in different countries in Asia. In the game, you could choose among 3 heroes, warrior, mage or archer, to play through levels that consisted of sets of successive combats against groups of enemies of various types. Although the game was cancelled before making it to a global release, the design challenges that were faced during its development gave us some valuable learnings about designing mobile RPGs. The purpose of this article is to collect our experiences while designing some of the systems in the game. The main loop of the game was rather simple. By completing quests, players accumulated gold that could be spent buying new items. Stronger equipment increased the overall power of the hero, which in turn allowed quests of increasing difficulty to be played. With the simple main loop described above, the overall player experience was determined essentially by 3 game systems. A combat system, consisting of all the elements that contribute to the outcome of a combat and their interrelations. As in many RPGs, these elements include player stats like attack, health and defense, chance of dealing critical damage, elemental or splash damage, etc. The outcome of a combat is determined through the combat equations that relate the status of heroes to those of enemies. For instance, given the attack power of a hero and a monster's health, the equations of combat determine the number of hits it will take to kill that monster. A progression system, which consists of the set of rules that determine how the different hero and monster stats grow as the player progresses through the game. In Hero, progression was mainly driven by gear. The status of a character were determined by the gear he had equipped. The higher the level of an item, the more it would contribute to the character's stats. The current level of a hero determined the level of the gear that the hero could equip, and hence the stats that the hero would have. The chest system, which was a random reward system, through which gear was delivered. The chest system consisted of the different types of chests present in the game and the rules to which they were subjected. Job price, frequency, item probabilities. There were chests of many types, each of which had its chances of delivering items of a given rarity. Each of the systems described here could be analyzed on its own. However, the 3 systems were highly interdependent on each other. For example, since the progression system was essentially driven by gear and gear was obtained by collecting chests, this meant that the chest system was the core driver of progression. Setting up the right chest rules and their job frequency was crucial to fuel an appropriate progression rate for the heroes. On the other hand, the progression system determined how the different hero and enemy stats scale. This in turn determined the outcomes of a combat. Hence, the combat system had to be carefully designed to accommodate the specific character progression we had designed. Finally, the outcome of a combat determined the chests that a player was going to get, which again connects to the progression system. Once we understood these interrelations, it became evident that we needed a way to explore the consequences on the overall player experience that arose from each game system, and its impact on the rest of the systems. We achieved this through a combination of mathematical modeling, prototyping tools, and simulations. In the following, we do you like to review some of these approaches? Combat systems are at the heart of any action RPG. When a combat system is coupled to a progression system, they both need to be carefully designed to be compatible with each other. Otherwise, it is possible that a combat that seems to be balanced at some stage in the progression behaves in a completely different way at later stages. To understand this, let's consider a minimal combat system in which a hero monster are characterized only by 2 stats, attack and health. During combat, the hero will have to attack the monster several times until it runs out of health and dies.